Amid the snowbound peaks of the Sierra Nevada, the name Donner lingers like a curse. In the winter of 1846, a wagon party was trapped in the storms, forced to consume one another to survive. Locals whisper that whenever a blizzard rises, the old cabin where they once huddled flares to life again. Inside, withered skeletons sit eternally around the table, beckoning lost travelers to join a feast without end, where the meat is always warm. The storm came without warning, swallowing the Sierra Nevada in a suffocating white sea. Nathan, leading his group of 3 hikers, fought to find a path through the leaning pines, but the blizzard erased every trace of the trail. Their breaths puffed out in frozen clouds, each step sinking thigh-deep into the snow. Nightfall dropped swiftly, draping the mountains in a dim, oppressive shroud. The cold sliced through skin and bone, numbing Nathan's fingers even through his gloves. Hunger gnawed at them, tremors racked their bodies, and fear seeped in with every step. They no longer knew which direction led back to camp. All that remained was the sensation of being swallowed alive by a labyrinth of ice. Just as despair took hold, a shape loomed through the storm. A weather-beaten cabin, roof sagging under a heavy crown of snow, its doorway nearly buried. Nathan stumbled forward, shouldered open the groaning door, and was met by a gust of air thick with mildew, rotting wood, and the faint tang of old smoke. Inside, weak light filtered through cracks, falling on layers of dust. The cabin was cramped, its timber walls split with age, yet it still bore the trace of human habitation. Around a mold-stained table sat 3 skeletons, slumped as if caught mid-meal. Their hollow sockets bored into the gloom, jaws sagging open as though their final words had frozen in their throats. In the corner, the stone hearth lay long extinguished, though the blackened ash still clung like a shadow. Scattered across the floor were fragments of bone half buried in dirt. The place did not feel abandoned. It felt paused, arranged by some unseen hand only moments before, waiting for the next act to begin. The wind outside shrieked through the gaps in the walls, stretching into a mournful moan. Nathan stood frozen, the chill of the rotting boards seeping into his legs. Death had never left this cabin. It was only waiting for the next soul to step inside. Night fell faster than they expected. Outside, the blizzard screamed and smothered the entrance, sealing the cabin into their only refuge. Nathan and his 2 companions fed the hearth with rotting timber. The fire cracked to life, casting a jaundiced glow across the warped wooden walls, illuminating the 3 skeletons still seated in silence around the table. The air was thick with damp and mildew, but soon something else began to seep through. At first, it was only the faint tang of ancient ash. Then, as the flames roared brighter, a greasy scent spread, sharp and cloying, like burning fat. Nathan frowned. None of them carried food. And yet, the unmistakable odor of roasting flesh filled the room. A sound stirred near the hearth. At first, the faint pop of splintering wood. Then a steady clack, clack, clack. The cadence of a knife striking a cutting board. An old pot balanced on the stones began to tremble, rattling softly before exploding in a metallic clang, as though an unseen hand had hurled a spoon against its side. They froze. The cabin was small, every corner visible, yet no figure stood there. Only the lifeless relics quivered in the firelight, animated by some invisible force. Nathan swallowed hard, telling himself it was only exhaustion conjuring illusions. But then the pot's lid snapped open, revealing ash gone cold, and within it, charred fragments of bone. A ribbon of smoke uncoiled upward, twisting like a beckoning finger before dissolving into the gloom, leaving behind a stench of scorched flesh that thickened the air. Footsteps followed, soft, deliberate, dragging, circling the table. The skeletons remained unmoving in their chairs, but the empty space between them seemed to swell with a darkness more solid than shadow. On the table, a cracked wooden bowl inched forward, scraping until it halted before Nathan. In the shifting firelight, it looked freshly placed, as though by a host eager to serve. The wood even seemed warm to the touch. Outside, the storm howled, like a starving beast. Inside, the air pressed heavy and close, suffocating, charged with the quiet anticipation of invisible guests, preparing a feast not meant for the living. By me. The fire roared higher, though they had fed it nothing more. Its sickly glow spilled across the warped walls, stretching shadows into grotesque shapes. For an instant, it seemed the skeletons hunched at the table were stirring, necks lolling forward, then snapping upright again in the blink of an eye. Nathan rubbed his eyes, blaming exhaustion, but when he looked back, the table had transformed. The cracked wooden bowls, empty when they first entered, now brimmed with steaming cuts of meat. Thick, red, glistening slices, releasing a savory scent that clawed at their starved stomachs. Hunger stabbed at Nathan's gut like needles, wearing down every instinct to resist. One of his companions, weaker than the rest, trembled as he reached for a piece. In the firelight, it resembled venison or wild boar, something plausible in these mountains. He shoved it into his mouth, chewing greedily, teeth grinding with frantic abandon. At first, Nathan only felt envy at the sound of flesh between his companion's teeth. But then, the firelight shifted, and Nathan saw it. Embedded in the glossy meat was a scorched fingernail, jutting from pale sinew. A long, charred strand of hair clung to his friend's lip, singed and acrid. The man didn't notice, only chewed faster, eyes bulging, face flushed in delirious satisfaction. Nathan's breath caught, his blood running cold. He tried to scream, but his throat was sandpaper, too dry to form sound. More platters appeared on the table, neatly arranged, still steaming. What had smelled rich now reeked of roasted flesh and burnt blood. The cabin shifted. From the corners rose whispers, at first single syllables, then twisted invitations, lullabies warped and muffled as if sung through soil. Each murmur raised the hair on Nathan's skin, as though the rotten floor itself was pleading. And then came another sound, the wail of a child. Thin, relentless, muffled as though it seeped up from beneath the boards. The air turned brittle with cold. Nathan looked back, and his heart froze. One of the skeletons had moved. Its skull, once slumped, was now lifted, eyeless hollows fixed on him. Its jaw worked soundlessly, yet its rhythm matched the whispers surrounding them. The chair groaned under its shifting weight, as if it prepared to rise. The second friend collapsed into sobs, clutching his head, babbling nonsense. His gaze flicked from the food to the bone figures, and then, in a frenzy, he lunged at the table. He snatched up a half-burnt femur, still streaked with flesh, and sank his teeth in. Blackened blood oozed down his chin, pattering onto the wood below. The cabin shook. Pots and pans clattered like war drums, their tempo quickening, urging. Footsteps, dozens, heavy and hurried, circled them, closing the trap. Nathan understood then. The banquet had never ended. The Donna dead, once starving, once cannibals, remained. The bones were husks. Their spirits lingered, hosting, serving, waiting for strays to join their feast. His vision blurred. In a blink, the cabin swarmed with gaunt phantoms, skin shredded, jaws working, mouths smeared crimson, hands reaching. The skeletons rose from their chairs, vertebrae cracking, heads twisting at impossible angles, welcoming the newcomers. Nathan staggered back, his spine pressed to the icy wall. But he knew there was no escape. The cabin's door was gone, swallowed by the dark. Only the fire remained, burning bright and red, lighting the endless feast of the starving dead who hammered their rhythm, calling him to the table. The cabin was no longer a refuge. It had become a living banquet hall. Fire roared in the hearth, casting the walls in a frenzy of dancing shadows, shapes of shredded bodies swaying and gnawing, though in truth only 3 living men remained. Yet to Nathan the room was overflowing with guests. Invisible diners leaned close to their feast, every eyeless stare fixed upon him. The first companion, the one who had eaten first, slumped over the table, his shoulders jerking in violent spasms. His spine jutted sharp against his skin as ragged flesh tore open, exposing the raw meat beneath. Nathan watched in horror as ribs surfaced, splitting through as though some unseen butcher worked from within. But no blood spilled, only the choking perfume of fat sizzling on coals, sweet and rancid, filling every breath. The second friend still clutched his charred bone, but now a hoarse laughter bubbled from his throat. His eyes clouded white, his tongue lolling, black blood dribbling down his chin. When he lifted his head, Nathan recoiled. His face was collapsing inward, cheeks hollowing, teeth lengthening into jagged fangs. Rents in his flesh stretched wider, splitting to reveal a second mouth, yawning across his throat. The whispers surged, clearer than before. Sit with us. Eat with us. Hungry? Lost one? Their voices slithered into Nathan's skull, weaving with the gnawing ache in his belly. His hands trembled. Even knowing the source, the scent of roasting meat made his jaw ache with want, saliva filling his mouth against his will. Across the table, a bowl slid toward him. Inside, a slab of charred flesh still dripped with grease, hissing as it struck the wood. Nathan shook his head, backing away, but the unseen diners pressed closer. Footsteps shuffled all around, slow and circling. Cold breath slid along his neck, whispering hunger. The second friend screamed suddenly, head snapping back with a crack of bone. Then he dropped forward, plunging his face into the platter, tearing chunks with his new-grown fangs. The sound of chewing filled the cabin, obscene and animal. Nathan saw him not as a man, but as the latest guest welcomed to the dinner table. Everywhere, jaws worked, teeth cracked bone. The skeletons had risen now, their empty sockets following Nathan's every movement. Their jaws hung open in wide, grinning invitations. With a gesture, they beckoned. With their silence, they commanded. Nathan doubled over, clutching his stomach as hunger twisted into agony. Something gnawed at him from inside. The meat before him blurred, then sharpened again, shimmering golden, almost holy in its allure. A whisper brushed against his ear, so close it seemed spoken from his own skull. If you do not eat, you will be eaten. Nathan staggered back until his shoulders struck the wall. He knew the truth now. In the Donner cabin, there was no escape, no mercy. One either sat down to eat, or became the meal. Nathan forced himself to stand in the circle of shadows, stomach writhing as the scent of roasted flesh clung to every breath. The whispers surged, relentless, pounding like a drum beat in his skull. "Sit down. Eat. Join us." The skeletal figures circled the table, jaws clattering like funeral drums. The first companion was nothing more than a husk now, face buried in his plate, black smoke curling from his back, as though his body smoldered from within. The second, no longer human, lifted his head, eyes milky white, mouth split wide to his ears. He held out a glistening hunk of red meat toward Nathan, blood dripping onto the wooden floor in steady taps. Nathan croaked a dry scream, shaking his head, but his throat was too parched, his knees buckled with weakness. And then he heard it, another voice whispering beside his ear. Not a stranger's voice, but his own, warped and echoing from the dark. "You've already chosen. The table never runs out of chairs." Strength drained from him. He collapsed into the waiting chair. At once, the empty bowl before him filled, piled high with steaming flesh, the aroma suffocating. The skeletons pounded their bony hands against the table in ghoulish celebration, the clatter rising like a cheer. Firelight flickered over Nathan's face as it changed, eyes sinking into hollows, skin blanched, jaw twitching in spasms. His trembling fingers lifted a morsel to his lips. The moment his teeth pierced the meat, the cabin shuddered as if exhaling in relief. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a chorus of chewing, wet, relentless, eternal. Nathan's own sounds joined them. The grind of teeth through tendon, the convulsions of his throat as he swallowed. Outside, the storm ebbed. Dawn spread its pale shroud across the Sierra Nevada, and the cabin grew still again. Its door remained buried, its timbers dark, no trace of life left within. Only the table endured, set neatly with 3 skeletons, sitting in solemn vigil. On the 4th chair sat a new figure, rigid and pale, eyes hollow, jaw agape in a permanent invitation. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wall, carrying the faintest murmur. "We are still waiting." "Ah, woo." Staten Island, the legend of Cropsey has never faded. They say he prowls the dense forests and abandoned sewer tunnels where the darkness never recedes. Towering, lurching, and armed with a rusted blade, he stalks the unlucky who dare to enter. Old toys, childish sketches, and pale, staring eyes hidden deep in the shadows are all that remain of those who vanish. And anyone who hears the scrape of metal dragging across the night never returns. Wait, you're there. The dirt road that cut into the depths of Staten Island's forest had long since been reduced to a faint scar beneath the weeds. Branches clawed at jackets as the group of 4 teenagers pushed forward, each scratch leaving pale marks like ghostly warnings. The fading afternoon light bled weakly through the canopy, falling in sickly patches across their path, as if the forest itself whispered that they should turn back. Willowbrook Camp revealed itself after a bend in the trail. Rows of sagging cabins with collapsed roofs and walls that peeled like rotting skin. The playground at the entrance stood frozen in silence, where a rusted swing swayed lazily, creaking in the breeze with a sound too hollow, too human. Nearby, a warped steel slide jutted upward, its base sunken deep into damp soil, like the headstone of a childhood long buried. Inside the first cabin, dust hung so thick that every step sent clouds rising like pale smoke. Broken bunk beds lay scattered in heaps, their frames twisted. In the corner slumped a gutted teddy bear, stuffing spilling from its torn belly like an unhealed wound. On the stained wall, faint crayon drawings still lingered, childish stick figures holding hands beneath the looming shadow of something impossibly tall. The children said nothing, but their eyes clung to every fragment left behind. One boy picked up a tiny tricycle, its rusted wheels squealing with each turn. The sound echoed through the hollow cabin, absurdly small, yet unbearably heavy, as if carried from a past that refused to rest. The sun dipped lower, smothered by the tree line, and shadows swallowed the camp. The air thickened, damp and cold, seeping into lungs until each breath felt stolen. From somewhere distant, a crow shrieked, a harsh, broken cry, then went silent, leaving a suffocating stillness. One of the teens tugged open the warped door of the storage shed. The stench of mildew rolled out to greet them. Piled inside were forgotten relics of play. Dolls with fractured faces, toy trucks missing wheels, a child's cap stained with a dark rust-red bloom. On a crooked wooden shelf leaned a stack of photographs, their images blurred by time. The children leaned closer. Each picture showed camp kids lined up in uniform, smiling with mouths too stiff, eyes too empty. A gust of wind slipped through the cracked boards, making the photos quiver. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire camp exhaled, heavy and tired. And in that instant, the intruders understood. They were not the first to wander here in decades. Something had remained. Something that watched, patient and hungry, from just beyond the dark. Nah. Night had swallowed Staten Island's woods whole, pressing darkness against every breath. The teenagers moved with flashlights in hand, their beams slicing thin arcs across the ruins of an abandoned bathhouse on the camp's edge. Hingis groaned as a sagging wooden door surrendered, opening into a chamber that reeked of mold and stagnant air. Broken tiles glistened with pools of black water, each reflecting the wavering light like liquid mirrors. On the peeling walls, crude chalk scrawls spread in tangled clusters, dozens of small figures drawn hand in hand, circling a towering shape with arms that scraped the ground. Its face was nothing more than a hollow smear of darkness. The group froze, beams quivering as they swept across the room. Every wall bore the same tableau, children gathered at the side of a looming skeletal giant. By the sinks, dark stains had dried into the concrete, trailing downward like veins of rust. They clung stubbornly, cracked into the floor as if time itself had tried and failed to erase them. The air shifted as a cold gust slithered in, carrying with it the sour stench of damp fabric, burnt plastic, and something far more rotten. In one corner lay a discarded Polaroid camera, its body choked with dust. One of the kids lifted it, finding a few photos wedged inside. Under the flashlight's glare, faces emerged, children smiling with distorted mouths, eyes empty sockets of pale gray. In one photo, behind the group of children, something massive loomed. Its outline was blurred, wrong, as though it had bled into the picture from another world. Then came a sound, soft at first, leaking upward through the pipes beneath the floor. A hiss, faint but alive, shifting into something higher, sharper. Laughter. A chorus of giggles rising and falling, echoing as if dozens of unseen children were playing just beneath their feet. The tiles trembled. Ripples spread across the stagnant puddles. The teenagers stared at one another, wide-eyed and mute. A flashlight beam swept toward the far end of the corridor. There, fresh chalk marks gleamed brighter than the others, drawn with unsettling clarity. And pressed into the dust beside them was a tiny handprint, wet, glistening, impossibly recent. The room fell silent, as though holding its breath. No wind, no birds, no sound but the hammering of their own hearts. And then it came, rising from the bowels of the tunnels below, the scrape of metal, dragging slow and heavy, rattling through the brick walls, announcing something that had already begun to move. That dragging metal sound pulsed again and again, steady as a deathbeat beneath the earth. The teenagers tried to pull away from the bathhouse, but their steps betrayed them, drifting toward the direction of the noise, as though something unseen guided their feet. Wind shrieked through the shattered slats, tilting flashlight beams into fractured arcs, illuminating shadows that seemed to close tighter with every step. Behind the rotting cabins they found it, a sewer hatch left slightly ajar. From the gap rose a chill so sharp it felt like ice in their lungs, carrying the rancid stench of carrion rotting in mud. The iron cover was streaked with rust, and below it yawned a ladder that vanished into endless dark. They shone their lights downward. The walls gleamed wet, veined with moss, every drip echoing like a clock tick counting down. Small handprints smeared the slick surface, layer upon layer of tiny palms, as if children had climbed down one after another. Some were fresh, wet enough that water still trickled in thin rivulets. One of them, braver or more foolish than the rest, set a foot on the ladder. The rungs groaned with a metallic scream under the weight. One by one, the others followed, swallowed into the dark. With every step deeper, the sound grew louder, not distant anymore, but crawling close. The deliberate scrape of something immense dragging its blade. It moved slowly, arrogantly, as though certain that prey could never escape. The tunnel stretched before them, endless and waterlogged. Stagnant pools lapped at their ankles, stinking of rust and mold. Abandoned relics littered the sludge, the bent frame of a stroller, a child's shoe gnawed apart, the headless remains of stuffed animals drifting like corpses. When the flashlights swept the walls, the chalk drawings appeared again. This time sharper, crueler, children with eyes washed white, clutching hands around a bent, towering figure whose grasp held a scythe. The whispers returned, clearer now, flitting through the tunnel like breath against their ears. High-pitched giggles swelled and faded, skipping from wall to wall, circling them, crawling under their skin. The water rippled, though nothing moved. Then the beam of a flashlight swept forward and froze. At the tunnel's end, a shape stood motionless. Too tall, shoulders hunched, head canted, unnaturally to the side. Arms dangled near the ground, one fist clutching a wide, corroded blade. The steel's tip scraped across the concrete with a shriek that shivered the air. The light trembled over his face, blurred flesh, mottled and uneven, as if dragged too far across bone. A face without balance, without mercy. And from the hollow sockets of his eyes, twin glints flared back like a predator's in the night. The teenagers froze, breaths caught, hearts hammered against ribs like prisoners against walls. And then, as though the light itself had awakened him, the figure moved, lurching, limping, yet impossibly quick. The scythe shrieked louder, grinding against concrete, the sound swelling until it rattled the walls. Water splashed violently with each heavy step, as if the entire tunnel were gasping, choking in rhythm with his approach. A scream tore loose, shattering the silence. Panic surged, and the group bolted, flashlights scattering wild beams across the dripping walls. Behind them, the dragging blade struck harder, faster, echoing through the cavern. And woven through the metallic shrieks was laughter. Thin, cruel laughter in many voices, the laughter of children long broken. Footsteps thundered behind them, heavy and relentless, each one reverberating through the marrow of their bones. The teenagers stumbled through the twisting tunnels, flashlights flaring wildly against the walls. The chalk drawings multiplied with every turn, little figures grinning with mouths stretched too wide, while the looming, hunched giant grew larger, swallowing entire walls, as if the tunnel itself was painting the hunter that stalked them. Filthy water splashed cold against their legs, sharp as ice. From the cracks above, the wind hissed, but tangled in the draught came whispers. Children's voices. "Don't run. Stay. Come play with us." The words spiraled through the corridor, impossible to trace, near and far, all at once. Suddenly, one of them slipped. A flashlight clattered across the flooded floor, spinning, then landing with its beam locked onto the tunnel's far end. He was there. Tall, skeletal shoulders twisted, one arm dangling lower than the other. The scythe scraped the ground with a metallic groan, each drag louder than breath. The group shrieked, scrambling to their feet, but it was too late. Cropsy lunged forward. A long arm swung, the blade slicing through the dark. No blood, no spray. Only the hollow scream of steel cleaving air. The light flickered, died, then surged back. One of them was gone. Only a torn backpack bobbed in the filthy water. Panic tore through the survivors. They bolted deeper, yet the tunnel coiled endlessly, stretching like a labyrinth with no exit. Every corner they turned, cold wind rushed from ahead, carrying shrill giggles that echoed like knives. On the walls, the handprints smeared thicker, wetter, as though pressed fresh by unseen palms. A flashlight beam veered right into a circular chamber. Its domed ceiling dripped with condensation, and scattered chairs lay broken in heaps. Shredded stuffed animals slumped in corners, while crooked frames dangled from the walls. At the room's center, a long table stood beneath a rotting green cloth, set with broken plates and children's toys arranged like offerings. The group stopped, gasping. The air felt swollen, pressing against their lungs. The room was waiting. Then, from behind the table, he emerged. Cropsy, Ma. No longer a shadow. Whole. His body warped, his face sagging like wax melting under flame. Deep sockets burned with a feral gleam, catching the flashlight's jittering beams. In his grasp, the scythe tilted, its blade mottled with rust and streaks of dried red. He moved closer, halting, deliberate, confident. The way a predator closes the space when it knows the corner has already been sealed. Each step struck like a drumbeat inside their chests. The air chilled, thickened, suffocating. They backed against the wall, slick with moss, nowhere left to run. Then, all at once, the picture frames fell. Glass shattered across the floor. From behind the broken panes, children's faces stared out. Eyes rolled white, mouths split into jagged grins. The voices came next, hundreds of them, threading directly into their skulls. "Sit down. The feast is ready." The flashlights flickered, then died. The chamber collapsed into absolute dark. And in that void, only one sound remained. The long, deliberate sweep of a scythe, sliding across concrete. Slow, certain, inescapable. Nyani. The blackness swallowed the entire chamber, so thick it weighed down every breath. There was no light anymore, only the steady drip of water, the frantic thump of hearts, and above all the unending scrape of a scythe dragged across concrete. One of them screamed, flicking a lighter to life. The tiny flame stuttered, casting a trembling glow over Cropsy's face, just inches away. Flesh sagged like melted wax, one socket hollow, the other gleaming with a feral yellow spark. His breath stank of rust and rot, the stench of blood clinging to every exhale. The scythe swung. A scream was cut short. The flame snuffed out. Silence, then the splash of water, as though the tunnel had just swallowed another soul whole. The survivors staggered forward, plunging deeper into the maze. But the tunnels weren't the same anymore. The paths twisted endlessly, corridors folding into each other like a nightmare with no escape. Every footstep echoed unnaturally long, as though the ground itself refused to carry them closer to safety. Behind them, the dragging steel sang on the concrete, sometimes distant, sometimes right at their heels. Cropsy was playing. Another stumbled, their flashlight tumbling into the water. Its glow flickered just enough to reveal the figures. Rows of children standing shoulder to shoulder in the tunnel. Faces chalk white, eyes hollow, mouths cracked into rigid smiles. Tiny hands reached out, whispering, "Stay with us." When Cropsy stepped forward, the children's shapes melted into him, their pale faces vanishing into the grotesque swell of his form. His arm lifted. Another body was gone. At last, only one remained. Breath ragged, eyes wide with hopeless terror, they ran on and on. Then, light, a faint glimmer ahead. An open manhole cover, spilling the glow of street lamps into the dark. The survivor clawed their way toward it, trembling fingers curling over the icy rung of the ladder. But the darkness thickened behind them, pressing close, heavy with the stench of rust and decay. A hand, long, deformed, skin hanging loose, closed over their shoulder. Cold breath brushed their ear. For the briefest moment, they looked up and saw safety just above. A police cruiser rolling by, red and blue lights painting across the manhole's lip. They tried to scream, but no sound came. The scythe fell. Darkness sealed shut. Above ground, Staten Island lay quiet beneath the night sky. No one knew what had happened below, where children's laughter echoed once more, mingling with the scrape of steel on concrete. And the legend of Cropsy had never ended. No. In 1912, the Moore family and two young guests were murdered in their sleep, each struck down by the swing of an axe inside a small white house in Villisca, Iowa. The killer was never found. What remained was not just a crime, but a wound, a scar pressed into the town's history, stretching across more than a century. The locals whisper that when night falls, the house replays its sorrow. The echo of steel still thuds against unseen wood. Doors drift open as if nudged by invisible hands. Beds tremble faintly, as though reliving the last moments of breath and fear. And when a documentary filmmaker arrives, determined to spend the night within those walls and capture the truth, his camera lens will become more than a tool. It will serve as a third eye, one that does not blink, one that stares into the dark, and one that will learn that some things should never be seen. The road into Villisca was narrow and hushed, flanked on either side by endless fields of withered corn. Daniel Ross drove a battered pickup truck, the back weighed down with cameras, tripods, and a scattering of flashlights. On the seat beside him rested a worn notebook, its pages filled edge to edge with cramped handwriting, the Moore case, 1912. For months, he had studied the story, consuming court transcripts, yellowed newspaper clippings, and whispered folklore. Tonight would be the first time he came face to face with it. The house revealed itself after a sagging wooden fence, small, steep-roofed, its once white paint dulled to the color of ash. No lamps glowed in its windows, no voices stirred from within. Only the wind slipped through the cracks, coaxing from the boards a faint and mournful groan. Daniel stopped the truck. His heart thudded in his chest, faster than he expected. He had prepared himself for silence, but the air here was different. Denser, heavy, as if an invisible curtain hung over the property, sealing it off from the ordinary world. Inside, the floorboards complained beneath his every step. The furniture was plain: an oak dining table, a rocking chair, a few black and white photographs framed on the walls. What unsettled Daniel most was not what he saw, but how untouched it all seemed. The house did not feel like a relic in a museum. It felt like a home that had been left yesterday, the air still holding the echo of lives, abruptly cut short. He unpacked his gear with mechanical precision, placing the main camera in the living room and setting up a second at the narrow hallway leading upstairs. His voice, captured by the microphone, trembled ever so slightly, roughened by tension. This is the house where the Moore family took their final sleep. On the night of June 10th, 1912, a stranger entered with an axe. 8 souls were taken, and the killer vanished. No one ever knew his name. Since then, this house has never truly been silent. Daniel lowered himself onto the bed in the downstairs room. From there, he stared through the window into the black beyond. In his mind's eye, a different image took shape. 8 still forms stretched beneath sheets. The night itself wrapped tight around the intruder like a cloak. He shivered. He reminded himself he was here only to film, to capture evidence, to record what folklore could not. Yet, no matter how he repeated it, a gnawing certainty lingered. The house was listening. Every word he spoke was sinking into its walls, acknowledged by something unseen. Then it came. A sharp click. From above. It could have been the wind. It could have been the shift of old wood. But it might have been something else. Daniel raised his head, forcing a smile at the lens. Seems we're not alone. His hand tightened on the camera as he adjusted the angle, trying to disguise the pressure coiling tighter in his chest. The night had only begun, and Villisca was already whispering. And whispers have a way of becoming louder. Now, night fell quickly in Villisca. By the time the clock drifted past midnight, the little wooden house seemed swallowed whole by a mass of suffocating darkness. Daniel sat in the living room, his gaze fixed on the glow of his laptop screen, where the cameras streamed their silent vigil. A flashlight rested beside him. The microphone remained live, but the silence pressed down so thickly that each second seemed to crawl. The first sound came from the staircase, a single, deliberate creak. Daniel flinched, swiveling the camera toward the source. Only blackness stared back at him, that hollow place where the hallway bulb had burned out long ago. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to believe it was nothing more than wood groaning in the cold. But then, another sound split the stillness. Thud. Dot. Measured, heavy, unmistakable, like something weighty settling against the floorboards. No longer random, but purposeful. A rhythm, deliberate and slow, as though someone unseen was walking on the second floor. Daniel's breath hitched. He lifted the flashlight and handheld camera, forcing himself up the narrow stairs. His light skimmed the walls, revealing cracks that spread like veins through plaster. The air grew thick with the damp, sour scent of rot. Halfway up, he froze. Whoosh! The sharp, metallic hiss of an axe cutting through air, striking nowhere. The sound cleaved through the dark, chilling him to the marrow. He swept the flashlight wildly across the staircase, pulse hammering in his ears. Nothing. Only warped wood and the gaping emptiness above. But the camera was still running, and the microphone had captured what he prayed was only an echo. He forced himself upward. The bedrooms emerged at the landing, simple yet oppressive. A naked bulb dangled from the ceiling, long dead, swaying faintly as if stirred by a breath. Daniel positioned the camera toward one of the beds, the narrow frame where the Moore children had once slept. Then the bed shuddered. At first, the tremor was subtle, like the faint ripple of someone shifting beneath the sheets. But it grew sharper, rattling the wooden frame until it whined in a high, piercing shriek. Daniel thrust the beam of his flashlight forward. The mattress was bare. No one lay there. Cold sweat traced his temples as he stumbled back. A droplet struck the camera lens. He blinked, frowning, and reached out with his hand. Sticky, dark, thick. Blood. Daniel lifted his eyes. Across the ceiling, pale plaster was darkening. Thin rivulets seeped downward, spreading, multiplying, until they formed red, gleaming stains. They fell in droplets that pattered against the floorboards, slowly shaping themselves into something grim, the inverted outline of an axe head looming above him. His chest rose and fell in short, frantic bursts. He backed toward the doorway, but before he reached it, the door slammed shut with a booming finality. The sound reverberated through the entire house, like a groan of wood and bone. He was trapped. The darkness seemed to thicken, pressing closer. And then the axe returned. Not visible, not wielded by any hand he could see, but its sound filled the room. Each phantom strike rang out as though it split the air inches from his body. Blow after blow, relentless, invisible, seeking him. The camera shook in his hands, capturing every tremor, every gasp, every unholy echo. And in that instant, Daniel understood. He was not merely documenting a haunted house. He was being written into its story. The hour, day. The room felt suffocating, as if the very air had thickened to stone. Daniel pressed his back against the wall, his camera trembling in rhythm with his heartbeat. Above him, the ceiling continued to bleed, each drop of dark red falling to the floor and spreading outward into long, thin streaks. Trails that began to resemble footprints, pacing slowly across the boards. The flashlight sputtered twice, then died. Darkness rushed in, swallowing the room whole. The only glow left was the frail beam from the camera, casting a pale reflection across Daniel's terrified face. His own eyes stared back at him, wide and frantic, trapped in that sickly light. Then the sound returned. Whoosh! Whoosh! The stroke of an axe splitting the air, closer now, whispering past his ear. The atmosphere itself seemed torn apart, though no wood splintered, no blade struck. The room remained bare, empty yet charged with a violence that pressed against his skin. Desperate, Daniel swept the camera from side to side, searching for proof, for anything solid. And for a moment, he saw it. A shadow. Tall, blurred, and indistinct. One arm hung at its side, the other clutched something long. The shape unmistakable, the haft of an axe. But when he lowered the camera, the figure was gone. Only blackness and silence remained. A sharp crackle burst from the equipment. Downstairs, the laptop screen flickered, its live feed sputtering. The picture stabilized and revealed the staircase. Someone was standing there. Not him. A stretched silhouette, hunched slightly forward, arms dangling, head tilted as though broken. Where its eyes should have been were only two cavernous hollows, pits of unbroken dark. Cold dread swept through Daniel. He lunged for the bedroom door, twisting the knob with frantic force. To his shock, it yielded instantly, swinging open without resistance. The hallway yawned before him, lightless, cold wind rushing through as if to beckon him deeper into the house lungs. He descended the stairs, each step echoing, each echo pursued by another. Behind him, the tread of footsteps followed, slow, heavy, relentless. He did not dare turn, for he already knew something was walking in his shadow. He burst into the living room. The laptop still glowed, recording faithfully. The feed flickered once more, and then the camera turned its gaze back upon him. But he was not alone in the frame. Behind him, stark and undeniable, loomed a hand, slick with blood, clutching an axe that dripped in steady rhythm to the floor. Daniel spun around, heart pounding. The room was empty. Only the rocking chair moved, swaying gently back and forth, creaking as though someone had just risen from it. Cold sweat drenched him. He backed into the corner, the handheld camera still rolling, still capturing every shallow breath that rattled in his chest. Each exhale sounded wrong, almost as if it belonged not to him, but to someone who had once struggled for air on these very floorboards. And then the sound changed. The axe no longer sang through the air. It struck inward, not against wood or walls, but against his mind. A voice, blunt and cold, whispered like iron against his skull. 8, then 9. Daniel's stomach dropped, his vision blurred. And with that, he understood. In this house, the number had never stopped at 8. Ani, Thi, Ki, Isiwao. Daniel tried to stagger out of the living room, but his legs felt leaden, as though nailed to the freezing floorboards. The house itself seemed to breathe, ragged and uneven, every crack in the wood groaning like something alive and mourning. On the laptop screen, the feed stuttered, then froze. The image that remained was hazy, indistinct. 4 small beds lined in a row, and upon them, the silhouettes of children lying motionless. Daniel's breath caught. He edged forward, trembling. Whoosh! The air split open. An axe stroke, sharp and merciless, cut through the silence. For a split second, there was a flare of light, and Daniel felt death sweep across his skin. A cold sting seared his cheek. Blood welled. Though no figure stood before him, he knew the blade had missed by inches. The axe was here, whether his eyes could see it or not. The house shuddered. From the hallway, something emerged. A shape. Tall, slow, heavy. Its face blurred and indistinct, shifting like smoke. But its hand was solid, terrible. Gripping an axe slick with fresh blood, gleaming wet in the camera's eye. Daniel stumbled backward, breath sharp and ragged, but the lens in his shaking hands betrayed him, framing the figure perfectly, capturing each deliberate step. Then came the whispers. Children's voices, soft, fractured, circling him from every corner. Don't let him swing again. Don't let him swing again. The plea rose, dozens of tiny voices merging into one mournful chorus, a choir of the lost. Daniel tilted his head upward, panic overtaking reason. Too late. The axe fell. This time, it was no illusion. White, hot pain exploded through his shoulder, ripping down his arm. His body convulsed. He collapsed, the camera clattering to the ground, its lens splintering but still recording, still watching. Through the cracked glass, the final image bled into focus. The hollow gaze of the Villisca killer. Eyes that had not blinked in over a century stared straight into the lens. Empty, endless, saturated with hate. And then the frame shuddered, as though the house itself exhaled, satisfied. Villisca had claimed another soul. Ibemunda. Morning broke over Villisca, pale and indifferent. The house stood exactly as it had the night before. Doors locked, windows shuttered, its silence unbroken. Inside, a flashlight lay forgotten in the corner, the camera shattered on the floor. The laptop still glowed faintly, its sickly blue light flickering like a dying heartbeat. But Daniel was gone. No blood. No footprints. No trace of departure. As if he had never existed at all. Yet, on the fractured memory card of the camera, one recording remained. The footage was jittery, warped through a cracked lens, but clear enough to freeze the breath of anyone who dared watch it. Daniel's screams tore through the static. The camera tumbled, the image splintered, and in that broken frame, through the jagged fissure of glass, a figure stood. The man with the axe. Eyes hollow. Blade dripping. Towering silently behind Daniel, as though it had always been there. The final swing echoed. Then, blackness. No one could explain the tape. Some dismissed it as a hoax. Others swore it was genuine, too raw, too vicious to be fabricated. But the question that lingered was never about the video. It was about Daniel. He had vanished without a trace, as though the house had swallowed him whole. And so the axe house in Villisca remained. Its wooden bones still seeped the metallic stench of rust and blood. Its rooms whispered faintly when night pressed close, restless and unquiet. And when the wind slid through the cracks in its doors, townsfolk swore they heard the thud of an axe falling, each strike echoing from the past, each one still unfinished. No one stayed after sundown. But the house was never done. It waited. Patient, hungry, for the next curious soul to step inside, press record, and add their screams to the story that began in 1912. A story the house has never stopped writing. Limsalien, das